There's a strange irony in the way the modern world glorifies motion. We applaud the ones who wake before dawn, who fill their calendars to the edge, who run on coffee and adrenaline and call it ambition. We equate speed with progress, busyness with importance, and exhaustion with accomplishment. But beneath this frantic rhythm, something essential is quietly breaking. Our ability to think clearly, to choose wisely, to move with intention instead of momentum. We have mistaken motion for meaning. Yet if you observe the ones who truly lead, the founders, the thinkers, the investors, the visionaries, a different rhythm emerges. They move slowly, almost unnervingly so. Their calm presence feels like a paradox in a world that races. It unsettles us because their stillness implies knowledge, that maybe they've discovered something the rest of us haven't. Watch a master negotiator, a seasoned CEO, or a wise investor. They rarely rush. Their words are measured, their pauses intentional. They seem to carry a quiet confidence that transcends urgency. This calm isn't laziness, it's control. It's the kind of mastery that can only exist when one has learned not to panic when others do. In the markets, this is the investor who stays calm when stocks fall. In leadership, it's the individual who speaks softly when tempers rise. In life, it's the person who takes a deep breath before deciding, who understands that reaction is rarely the same as response. The powerful have learned a truth that the restless overlook, that stillness is not weakness, but power refined. As Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Stillness, in this sense, is not withdrawal from life. It's the space where strength is tested and character is built. The calm exterior we see in powerful people is not the absence of struggle, it's the mastery of it. It's the quiet mind that has weathered chaos and no longer needs to match its pace. Most of us, however, are caught in the opposite rhythm. We live in reaction, sprinting from one demand to the next, chasing validation we can't name, moving faster because slowing down feels like failure. We scroll, refresh, check, compare. We mistake the hum of constant activity for significance. But if you've ever reached the end of a busy day and felt strangely hollow, as if you were moving all day but never truly went anywhere, you've glimpsed the truth. Motion without direction is noise. Think about how often we move simply to escape stillness. We open our phones, fill our schedules, start new projects, anything to avoid sitting quietly with our thoughts. Yet it's in those quiet spaces that clarity begins to form. The mind, like a lake, can only reflect truth when it's still. When disturbed, all it shows is distortion. The ones who learn to wait, to pause, to reflect, they don't move less. They move better. There's a story told about Warren Buffett that illustrates this perfectly. When asked how he spends his days, he reportedly said he often just reads and thinks, sometimes for hours. Most people find that answer unbelievable. Shouldn't the most successful investor in the world be in constant motion, making deals, chasing opportunities? But Buffett understands something most don't, that decisions made in haste cost more than time. They cost wisdom. He once said, "The difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything." Stillness, for him, is strategy. The paradox of doing less to achieve more feels unnatural because we've been conditioned to believe that effort equals worth. From an early age, we're taught that success is earned through constant exertion, but effort, unguided by clarity, is like running with a blindfold on. You might be moving fast, but you're not moving right. The ones who achieve extraordinary things are not the ones who do the most. They're the ones who see the most clearly. Imagine two people building empires. One rushes, multitasks, burns out, and rebuilds again. The other takes time to think, to plan, to listen. One reacts to the noise. The other studies its rhythm. Years later, the difference becomes visible. The first has built a tower of exhaustion. The second has built something enduring. That's the quiet advantage of stillness. It multiplies your effort by aligning it with purpose. Morgan Housel wrote, "Money's greatest intrinsic value, and this can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time. But time, on its own, isn't power. The ability to direct it with calm awareness, that's where real wealth begins. Stillness gives you that control. It's the space between impulse and action, where wisdom has room to intervene. When you slow down enough to see clearly, your movements gain meaning. Perhaps this is what separates noise from influence, chaos from creation. The great minds of history, from Einstein to Leonardo da Vinci, all valued contemplation as highly as action. They understood that the greatest leaps forward often begin not in frenzy but in silence. Einstein famously said that he thought for 99 times and found nothing. But when he stopped thinking and sank into silence, the answer came. Stillness was not his pause, it was his process. We live in a time that rewards immediacy, where hesitation feels like defeat. But what if hesitation is the beginning of mastery? What if the pause before the decision, the silence before the speech, the patience before the breakthrough? What if that's where the real work happens? The powerful know this. They let others rush to react while they wait to understand. They don't fear being late. They fear being wrong. Clarity creates speed, and stillness creates clarity. When your mind is calm, decisions that once felt heavy become simple. You stop chasing every opportunity and start choosing the right ones. You stop measuring progress by motion and start measuring it by meaning. You begin to realize that more was never the goal. Enough was. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It means moving from a place of centered awareness rather than scattered energy. It's the difference between reacting to life and responding to it. The calm investor, the patient leader, the grounded artist, they all draw from the same source. They understand that when the world grows loud, silence becomes a competitive advantage. The paradox remains uncomfortable. How can doing less lead to more? But perhaps the question itself reveals the problem. Doing is not where greatness begins, the being is. When you are centered, aware, and deliberate, your smallest actions carry enormous weight. Your silence speaks louder than noise. Your restraint becomes your strength, and that's the quiet truth hidden in plain sight. The still mind is the one that ultimately shapes empires. The restless build quickly and crumble quickly. The still build slowly but last. The powerful move with intention, because they've learned that speed means nothing without direction. And direction means nothing without clarity. So as you move through this audiobook, consider this simple thought. Maybe the race isn't to the swift, but to the steady. Maybe the most strategic move you can make isn't to do more, but to see more. And maybe, just maybe, the empire you've been trying to build begins not in action, but in stillness. Everything in nature moves to a rhythm. The ocean doesn't rush. It breathes. Waves advance with purpose, then pull back in graceful retreat. The trees don't grow in constant motion. They rest in winter and bloom in spring. Even your own lungs live by this pattern. Inhale, exhale, expansion, and release. Every force that endures understands this balance. Yet somehow, in our pursuit of success, we've forgotten the rhythm of power. We try to live on the inhale alone, always pushing, never pausing, always taking in, never giving space to breathe. Human ambition has become a kind of fever, a restless impulse to fill every moment with motion. We measure our worth by how much we do, how fast we move, how visibly we hustle. Rest has become a dirty word, synonymous with weakness or laziness. But that illusion is costing us dearly. When we forget to pause, we lose alignment. When we forget to reflect, we lose direction. Motion without rhythm isn't power, it's noise. And the truth is, power without rhythm burns out before it ever matures. Imagine a bow and arrow. The arrow's strength doesn't come from constant tension, but from the quiet moment before release. The stillness when it's drawn back, poised between potential and motion. That pause is not wasted time. It's the birthplace of force. The same is true for you. Every breakthrough, every bold decision, every great achievement you've ever made was preceded by stillness. A breath, a pause, a moment of clarity. We rarely notice it because we rush past it. Yet that invisible moment holds the true rhythm of power. There's a reason storms form after long stretches of calm. Nature understands timing. It builds energy quietly in the unseen layers beneath the surface. When the moment comes, that energy moves with unstoppable precision. Contrast that with human behavior. We often move prematurely, forcing outcomes, mistaking movement for mastery. We act before we've listened, spend before we've understood, speak before we've thought. Then we call it experience. But wisdom, as history shows, belongs to those who can balance motion with meaning. Napoleon Hill once wrote, "Deliberate action is born of calm, not chaos." He understood that stillness isn't a luxury, it's leverage. The most effective people don't rush to act. They prepare to act. They think in rhythm, moments of intensity followed by moments of introspection. That rhythm creates clarity. and clarity multiplies the impact of every move. It's why some people can achieve in a few hours what others chase for years. It's not that they do more, it's that they align more precisely. We live in an age where constant motion has become a badge of honor. Busy has replaced purposeful. The world applauds those who grind without pause, even as they quietly crumble inside. We glorify the all-nighter, the back-to-back meeting, the sleepless ambition, forgetting that even machines require downtime. The irony is sharp. In trying to outwork everyone, we often outpace our own wisdom. Stillness, once seen as the enemy, was always the missing half of success. Consider the great thinkers and creators of history. Leonardo da Vinci, who left behind notebooks of brilliance, was known for long walks and periods of contemplation. Einstein too valued daydreaming and silence as much as experimentation. Steve Jobs famously took long, quiet walks before making major decisions. These were not acts of laziness but of design. They understood something the hurried mind never will, that the most powerful insights arrive in moments of calm awareness, not chaos. The pause between actions is not absence, it's incubation. Yet the world's addiction to motion blinds us. We fill every silence, multitask through every day, and call it productivity. But constant motion scatters attention. It makes our lives wide but shallow, fast but unfocused. We end up exhausted, not from doing too much, but from never pausing long enough to remember why we're doing it at all. The emotional trap is subtle. We equate slowing down with losing relevance, as if stillness means we're being left behind. But relevance without reflection is fragile. It fades the moment the noise shifts. Stillness, on the other hand, refines purpose. It sharpens focus. It allows you to see patterns that busyness blinds you to. Like a sculptor who steps back to study the shape of the marble before carving again, stillness lets you see what's missing, what's essential, what deserves your energy. Rushing dulls that vision. It turns every decision into a reflex, every opportunity into a reaction. When we live that way, we might succeed for a while. But it's success without depth, momentum without meaning. There's an old proverb that says, "The arrow that flies straight first bows in stillness." The truth of that line is profound. It reminds us that every outward motion must first be inwardly aligned. When you pause, calmly, truly pause, you begin to feel life's natural tempo again. You notice that opportunities come in cycles, that effort has seasons, that even your body has rhythms of expansion and restoration. Trying to live always in acceleration is like asking the ocean never to retreat. It's against nature, and sooner or later, it breaks you. When you finally learn to balance action with reflection, something shifts. Decisions become more intentional. Work feels less frantic and more fulfilling. You stop trying to catch up to life and start moving in harmony with it. You find yourself doing less but achieving more, not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. The stillness that once felt uncomfortable begins to feel powerful. It becomes a quiet confidence, a knowing that every pause has purpose. In finance, this rhythm is equally vital. The investor who reacts to every fluctuation burns out. The one who waits with patience compounds wealth. In business, the entrepreneur who acts out of clarity, not panic, creates lasting impact. The same pattern appears in every domain. Success is rarely a sprint. It's a rhythm. The inhale fuels the exhale. The pause fuels the push. The still moment before movement defines the power of the movement itself. As James Clear wrote, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." Stillness is part of that system. It's the structure that keeps ambition sustainable. Without it, even the brightest flame burns out too soon. But when rhythm is restored, energy returns. You stop fighting life's current and start flowing with it. You act, then reflect. You move, then listen. And in that balance, you discover something deeper than productivity. You discover peace. When we finally pause long enough to listen, we realize that stillness was never the opposite of action. It was its foundation. It's not the gap between moments of life. It is life's rhythm, balanced and complete. Every breath you take proves this truth. Power is not in constant motion, but in deliberate rhythm. The inhale gives force to the exhale. The retreat gives strength to the surge. And in that quiet, sacred balance lies the rhythm that builds both empires and inner peace. Stillness is not a retreat from life. It's a vantage point. It's the quiet summit from which the terrain of your life finally becomes legible. When you stand still long enough, you begin to see what motion had blurred. The patterns, the leaks, the subtle misalignments between effort and outcome. It's as though the noise of daily living, once deafening, finally softens, revealing the faint hum of truth beneath it. And that's where mastery begins, not in the frenzy of action, but in the calm before it. The person who learns to pause learns to see. Most people never stop long enough to notice where their energy truly goes. They move quickly, check off lists, juggle obligations, yet somehow feel further from peace than ever. They confuse being busy with being productive, forgetting that motion without direction is chaos disguised as effort. Stillness exposes that illusion. When you slow down, you begin to see the leaks in your time, the tasks that feel urgent but aren't important, the conversations that drain more than they give. You start to realize how much of your life has been spent reacting rather than creating. That realization is sobering, but it's also the beginning of wisdom. In that quiet awareness, a new kind of intelligence forms, one that isn't driven by panic or pressure, but by clarity. You begin to see that not all action is progress. Some motion only keeps you from sitting with your own uncertainty. Stillness teaches you to hold that discomfort, to wait long enough for insight to rise from the silence. It's like the difference between muddy water and a still pond. In chaos, everything is stirred up, what emotion, fear, noise. In calm, the sediment settles, and the reflection becomes clear. That's when you can finally see the shape of your own path. This applies everywhere. In business, in relationships, in the pursuit of wealth. A trader who reacts to every market swing loses perspective. A leader who responds to every crisis with haste eventually makes poor decisions. A partner who speaks before listening misses the truth beneath the words. But the one who acts from stillness, that person wastes no motion. Every move is deliberate. Every word chosen, every investment made with clarity rather than compulsion. Their power doesn't come from speed, but from precision. Patience multiplies what panic destroys. It's a universal law. Think of compound interest, the quiet force that rewards patience. Time is its ally. Those who panic, who sell too soon, who grasp at short-term wins, forfeit the miracle that patience would have delivered. The same holds true in life. The impatient mind interrupts its own growth. The patient one compounds wisdom, reputation, and peace. Stillness gives you that patience, not because it teaches you to wait passively, but because it teaches you to act with timing. The quiet before action is not inaction. It's alignment. It's the gathering of force before release. Consider an athlete at the starting line, still but vibrating with readiness, or a musician before the first note, silent yet fully alive. Those moments of silence are not empty. They are charged with potential. The same is true for your own life. When you allow space before action, you don't lose time. You amplify it. You're no longer running blindly into your next move. You're aiming with awareness. Small shifts begin to appear when you live this way. You wait an hour before responding to an email that irritated you. You take a short walk before deciding on a big purchase. You pause a day before accepting a new commitment. At first, these pauses feel unnatural, even indulgent. But soon you see their power. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop buying things to fill emotional voids. You stop chasing what isn't aligned. The result isn't delay, it's precision. And precision saves you years of unnecessary struggle. In finance, this rhythm transforms everything. The investor who waits for the right moment, instead of forcing the market, gains more in the long run. The entrepreneur who steps back to assess, rather than reacting to every trend, builds something lasting. The family who pauses before every major expense learns that wealth isn't about speed of accumulation, but clarity of intention. Patience, when practiced as a rhythm, doesn't slow your growth, it stabilizes it. It makes success sustainable. Stillness also refines relationships. It teaches you to listen not just to words, but to energy. You start noticing when someone speaks from fear, from ego, from love. You stop reacting to the surface and begin responding to the essence. When you pause before speaking, you grant yourself the grace of understanding, and the other person the gift of being heard. The result is deeper trust, fewer arguments, and communication that feels grounded rather than defensive. In stillness, you stop performing and start connecting. The same applies to your ambition. When you're always moving, it's easy to mistake activity for progress. But when you slow down, you begin to discern whether your actions are truly moving you toward your purpose or merely distracting you from it. Many people chase goals they don't even want, simply because they never paused long enough to question their motives. Stillness is where that questioning happens. It's where you realize that maybe the goal isn't more money, but more freedom. Not more recognition, but more peace. The external chase fades, and the internal compass returns. This rhythm, the dance between action and stillness, gradually transforms how life feels. It stops being a chase and starts feeling like a dance. The movements become deliberate, the pauses intentional. There's flow instead of friction. You stop fighting time and start partnering with it. You stop fearing silence and start drawing strength from it. The external world may still move quickly, but inside you move in rhythm, anchored, aware, untouchable. There's a quiet dignity in living this way. It's not laziness or detachment, it's mastery of tempo. The greatest leaders, thinkers, and creators all share this rhythm. They work intensely, then retreat into stillness. They think deeply, then act decisively. That alternation is their secret, and it can be yours too. Once you internalize it, you no longer need the world's permission to slow down. You understand that slowing down isn't falling behind. It's falling into alignment with what truly matters. When life moves in rhythm, stress begins to lose its grip. You make decisions with confidence instead of fear. You spend with purpose instead of impulse. You work from focus instead of frenzy. You live like the ocean, steady, powerful, rhythmic, knowing that both the tide and the calm serve the same purpose. And in that realization, something profound unfolds. Success stops feeling like survival. It starts feeling like harmony. So pause, breathe, let silence do its quiet work. Stillness is not an absence of life. It is life in its most intelligent form. In the rhythm of daily living, in the pauses between doing and being, lies the very thing we're all chasing: clarity, peace, and the unmistakable feeling that we are, at last, moving in tune with ourselves. Imagine a chessboard. The pieces are perfectly still, their potential coiled in silence. Across from you sits a grandmaster, calm, composed, unhurried. You, however, feel the pressure of the clock, the hum of expectation. You move your pawn forward quickly, relieved to be doing something. But the master does not move. He studies, he waits, he sees. The silence between moves feels endless. But in that silence, the real game is unfolding, not on the board, but in the mind. The amateur rushes to act. The master waits to understand. One plays impulsively, the other perceives strategically. That image is not confined to chess. It is a mirror for how most people move through life. We rush from one task to the next, reacting, improvising, mistaking motion for mastery. We fill every gap with noise, the phone, the meeting, the next distraction, because silence feels like idleness. But the truth is, most of our lives are lived in reaction, not creation. We act before we've thought. We speak before we've listened. We spend before we've planned. And then we wonder why progress feels like running in circles. Those who understand the rhythm of stillness play life differently. They don't rush to fill every silence. They use it. They treat stillness not as a void, but as a weapon, the kind that cuts through confusion with clarity. To the untrained eye, silence looks passive, even lazy. But to those who understand its power, silence is the most active form of awareness. In that quiet, they are not doing nothing. They are watching, calculating, aligning. Every pause is preparation. Every breath is data. Every moment of stillness sharpens perception. Think of a skilled investor during market volatility. When the world panics, they don't move first. They observe. They know that emotional reaction destroys more wealth than any recession ever could. They wait for the noise to settle, for truth to rise above the hysteria. It's not luck that makes them successful. It's their relationship with stillness. They've learned that clarity, not activity, is the true generator of long-term gain. When you can remain silent amid chaos, you're not falling behind. You're outpacing everyone who mistakes frenzy for foresight. This same principle applies far beyond finance. In leadership, the most commanding presence often belongs to the one who speaks least but sees most. Their silence carries weight because it isn't empty. It's full of awareness. People sense it. They feel steadied by it. In conversation, they listen fully before replying. In conflict, they pause long enough to respond with wisdom rather than react from ego. That kind of silence doesn't just create strategy. It creates respect, trust, and influence. But let's be honest, silence is uncomfortable. It forces us to face what noise helps us avoid. The constant buzz of life keeps us from hearing our own uncertainty. When we slow down, the questions we've buried rise to the surface. Am I really happy with the path I'm on? Am I chasing success or avoiding fear? Most people drown those questions in distraction. But the few who dare to sit with them, who can endure that discomfort without reaching for the next escape, find something rare, self-clarity. And from that clarity, strategy is born. The pause is where wisdom gathers its strength. Just like an archer pulling back before release, silence is the tension that builds direction. The longer the pull, the truer the aim. Yet we resist that pull because we equate stillness with stagnation. We forget that even in apparent inactivity, growth is happening. The seed in the soil is silent, but it's not idle. The storm cloud gathers power long before it breaks. The silence between waves is what allows the ocean to breathe. Nature itself teaches us this rhythm. Every burst of force is preceded by stillness. In the modern world, we've lost touch with that rhythm. We measure productivity by speed, not significance. We reward those who respond fastest, not those who think deepest. But what if your greatest advantage isn't in how quickly you move, but in how wisely you wait? Consider the entrepreneurs who make billion-dollar decisions. They spend months, sometimes years, studying before taking one decisive step. To outsiders, that patience looks like hesitation. But to insiders, it's strategic maturity. They understand that rushing multiplies mistakes, while stillness multiplies insight. Every powerful decision in life carries a moment of silence before it, a breath before a leap. In that breath, something sacred happens. The noise clears, the mind steadies, the path reveals itself. That silence isn't empty. It's full of information, intuition, and alignment. When you rush past it, you make choices from fear. But when you wait within it, you make choices from truth. That's the difference between reacting to life and designing it. The great paradox is that silence looks inactive, but feels intensely alive. It's where intuition whispers its clearest instructions. It's where strategy matures without pressure. It's where ideas ferment into innovation. The most successful creators, thinkers, and leaders often appear detached because they operate in this dimension of stillness. They know that real power doesn't announce itself through noise. It emanates through composure. You can feel it when someone enters a room and doesn't need to speak to command attention. That's not charisma. That's centeredness, the fruit of practiced silence. We fear stillness because it strips us of distraction, and distraction has become our comfort. But if we can bear the discomfort long enough, something extraordinary happens. Our perception sharpens. We begin to sense opportunities that others overlook, risks that others underestimate, truths that others avoid. The noise fades and patterns emerge, the way a photograph develops in the dark. The longer you sit with silence, the more vivid your vision becomes. And the clearer your vision, the less you need to prove, to rush, or to react. The still mind sees the full board. It notices what others miss, the momentum of subtle forces, the hidden leverage, the quiet openings disguised as obstacles. In every area of life, from strategy to love, that awareness is the real advantage. The person who can wait without anxiety has already won half the battle. Because in that waiting, they're gathering perspective. And perspective is what transforms random action into precise movement. So the next time you feel the urge to react, to move, to fill the silence, pause. Let the stillness hold you for a moment longer than feels comfortable. Listen to the space between your thoughts. That is where strategy is born. That is where the master studies the board, while the world rushes to move. Remember, in life the true advantage doesn't belong to the one who acts first, but to the one who waits right. Modern society has become obsessed with motion. We glorify being busy as though exhaustion were a badge of honor. We wear our packed calendars like trophies, our unread emails as proof of importance. The world seems to applaud those who never stop moving, as if the person who sleeps the least and runs the fastest somehow wins. Social media amplifies this illusion. Every post, every update, every metric screams that to matter, you must always be in motion. But beneath the surface of all that movement, a quiet truth whispers. Motion isn't the same as progress. There's a subtle but powerful difference between activity and achievement. A hamster runs endlessly in its wheel, but it doesn't arrive anywhere new. Many of us do the same. We rush from one obligation to another, checking boxes and chasing validation. Yet we feel strangely hollow at the end of the day. We confuse motion with meaning because stillness feels unsafe. Doing something, anything, feels better than sitting in uncertainty. But as Seneca once wrote, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. The hours we spend in motion without intention are the true thieves of our potential. This obsession with speed is often rooted in fear, the fear of being left behind, of losing relevance, of facing ourselves. We chase movement because it distracts us from silence, and silence is where truth lives. When you slow down, the noise falls away, and what's left can be uncomfortable: doubts, insecurities, unfulfilled dreams. It's easier to stay busy than to confront the possibility that your busyness might not be leading anywhere meaningful. The tragedy is that this fear-driven motion often takes us further from the very clarity we seek. Think about how we define success. Most people equate it with accumulation: more projects, more money, more recognition. But success without direction is just noise. It's like climbing a ladder only to discover at the top that it's leaning against the wrong wall. Many hardworking people find themselves in this position, exhausted, accomplished, but unfulfilled. They've mastered the art of movement, but not the discipline of purpose. And that realization can feel devastating. The emotional cost of this illusion is profound. Burnout doesn't happen because people work too hard. It happens because they work without alignment. There's a difference between tiredness that comes from creation and exhaustion that comes from confusion. One nourishes you, the other empties you. When your motion isn't connected to meaning, it slowly erodes your inner compass. You wake up one day and realize you've lost not just energy, but enthusiasm. You've spent years running, but you no longer know why. This is why stillness is so radical. It breaks the pattern. It forces you to pause long enough to ask the uncomfortable questions. What am I really chasing? Who am I trying to impress? Is this motion producing meaning or merely distraction? At first, the answers might unsettle you, but that discomfort is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of awakening. The quiet space you create by stepping back becomes a mirror, reflecting not just your habits, but your hidden motivations. Stillness doesn't promise quick results. It's not the path of instant gratification, which is why so few choose it. Instead, it promises right results, the kind that endure because they come from alignment, not anxiety. In stillness, you don't just act. You act with intention. You don't just move. You move meaningfully. And as you do, something remarkable happens. What once felt like stagnation begins to feel like mastery. Consider the craftsman who sharpens his tools before cutting wood. From the outside, it might look like he's wasting time, but he knows that preparation is what ensures precision. The same is true in life. Stillness sharpens your mind, your goals, your decisions. It transforms motion from frantic to focused. When you finally take action, it's no longer a desperate attempt to prove your worth. It's a deliberate expression of it. We live in a world where everyone seems to be sprinting, yet few know where the finish line actually is. The irony is that speed without direction doesn't make you faster. It just makes you lost more quickly. It's like being caught in a current that carries you further from shore while you believe you're swimming toward it. When you slow down, you reclaim your sense of direction. You begin to notice the subtle signs, the currents, the opportunities, the quiet truths that the noise once drowned out. James Clear once wrote, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." The system of constant motion, of filling every silence, every moment, every day, doesn't lead to excellence. It leads to exhaustion. True growth comes not from adding more, but from refining what already exists. The moment you stop racing the clock, you start mastering time itself. You begin to see that patience is not the enemy of progress, it's the architecture of it. In finance, this principle is mirrored perfectly in the concept of compounding. Wealth doesn't grow from frantic trading or daily obsession. It grows quietly, consistently over time. The investor who can wait often outperforms the one who can't sit still. Likewise, in life, those who can pause, reflect, and realign are the ones who end up moving furthest, not because they run faster, but because they run in the right direction. The world doesn't need more motion. It needs more meaning behind that motion. Every decision, every step, every effort should come from a place of clarity, not compulsion. When you move from alignment, your energy multiplies. You accomplish more by doing less. simply because every action is charged with intention. The scattered energy that once fueled chaos now becomes focused power. So ask yourself, are you busy or are you building? Are you moving because it matters or because you're afraid to stop? These questions cut deep, but they're the beginning of freedom. The moment you stop performing busyness and start pursuing purpose, your entire relationship with time transforms. You no longer feel chased by the hours, you begin to command them. Stillness is not the opposite of progress, it's the foundation of it. It clears the fog, steadies your mind, and aligns your actions with your values. It teaches you to measure progress, not by how much you do, but by how much closer you are to what truly matters. When you trade speed for substance, something magical happens. Your results may take longer, but they last longer. So slow down, not to fall behind, but to see ahead. The world will try to convince you that your worth is measured by your motion, but don't believe it. The people who achieve lasting impact aren't the ones who move fastest. They're the ones who move with purpose. When you learn to wait with wisdom, to act from clarity rather than panic, you begin to master the rarest art of all, progress without chaos. And in that mastery, you discover something profound, that the quieter you become, the more life begins to speak. At first, stillness often speaks to us in the language of discomfort. You sit down to think and the mind rushes to fill the silence with tasks, to-do lists, anxieties, and half-formed excuses. That void feels dangerous because it removes the cover that busyness provides. When the noise leaves, the questions you've been avoiding come forward. Questions about purpose, about choices you made out of fear, about the pace at which you've been living. But that initial discomfort is not a warning sign that you are failing. It is a necessary fracture in the old way of seeing, a crack through which something tender and new will grow. The first step toward transformation is to notice the unease and not run from it, to give the silence time to do its work. As you stay, something subtle begins to happen. The pause that once felt empty becomes fertile. Small ideas you dismissed in the roar of daily life start to surface, clear and distinct, like notes finally audible when a room falls quiet. You notice patterns you'd missed before, recurring moments when energy leaks away, decisions that always steer you off course, relationships that demand more than they return. This is where intuition stops being a vague intuition and starts being a reliable instrument. By listening in silence, you begin to hear the cues your experience has been whispering for years. Rather than a void, stillness becomes a field where possibilities take root and where your mind can sift through noise to identify what truly matters. There is a turning point in this process, a moment when you stop seeking answers in the chaos and start hearing them in the calm. It often arrives unexpectedly, during a slow walk in the quiet between meetings, in the unhurried hour before sleep. And when it does, the movement that follows is different. Decisions no longer feel like emergency exits, pushed open in a panic. They arrive as choices you can stand behind. You begin to understand that many crises were less about the events themselves than about your hurried responses to them. When you cease to react to every flicker of drama, you discover that the world continues to offer opportunities, and that you can choose which ones align with the life you mean to live. With this deeper awareness, your choices simplify. Simplicity here is not a naive easing of complexity, but a refined clarity about where your energy should go. You find yourself saying no more easily to opportunities that glitter, but do not sustain. And yes, more readily to work that builds quietly over time. Wealth, success, and peace start to cease being separate pursuits tugging you in different directions. They converge around the same steady center. The investor who once chased every headline now waits for the signal that fits a long-term plan. The manager who answered every urgent email at midnight now schedules thoughtful time to review priorities. The parent who felt perpetually exhausted notices that a single focused hour of presence shifts the tone of an entire week. Action becomes precise because your intent is clear. Transformation through awareness also remakes the interior landscape. Impatience softens into discipline, and hesitation hardens into wisdom. Where you used to feel the twitch to respond and then regret it, you now have an easier time allowing the moment to breathe, to let your body and mind align. Discipline is no longer an iron will that punishes every slip, but a gracious stewardship of attention, a choice to protect the conditions in which your best work appears. Similarly, What looked like hesitation before becomes a measured pause that saves you from costly mistakes. The person who learns to wait right now accumulates fewer regrets later and gains confidence not from constant movement, but from calibrated motion. This awareness changes the architecture of your life. Instead of a reactive string of events, your days begin to reflect an intentionally designed rhythm. A morning of calm attention, work periods of concentrated effort, and stretches of restoration that replenish rather than fracture your focus. The discipline of stillness is not asceticism. It is design. It lets you build systems that support large aims without burning you out in the process. As James Clear reminds us, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Stillness informs those systems. It becomes the quiet engine that maintains them, the margin that prevents collapse. Practical transformations follow. In money, this awareness compels you to adopt investment habits that favor compounding over excitement, to budget with an eye toward freedom rather than status, and to prioritize relationships that sustain rather than drain. In work, it leads you to projects that compound over time. Books written one chapter at a time, businesses built on repeatable processes, reputations earned through steady competence. In personal life, it cultivates presence. You learn to listen fully, to let conversations breathe, to let grief and joy be processed rather than bypassed. The accumulation of these small, still practices yields a kind of margin that makes life resilient and generous. If you're wondering whether this process slows you down, notice the quality of momentum that replaces frantic speed. When your actions are born of calm awareness, they carry forward with less friction and greater impact. The difference is like the contrast between a river that rushes and splashes and a river that flows deeply and powerfully toward the sea. Both move, but only one shapes the landscape with enduring force. From the quiet center produced by sustained stillness, your moves become long-range rather than short-sighted. You begin to create rather than scramble, to steward rather than simply survive. So accept the discomfort of the initial pause, tend the fertile silence patiently, and let it reveal what your hurried life obscured. Your decisions will simplify, your energy will align, and the things you once chased in desperation will begin to find you in the steadiness of your presence. The promise of this work is not instant triumph, but durable mastery. A life designed from the inside out, where success and peace are not opposing pursuits, but the same quiet currency. When awareness deepens, the world no longer demands your frantic answer. It respectfully waits while you answer from a place of clarity. There comes a moment in life when silence transforms. It is no longer the uneasy void that demands to be filled, nor the awkward pause we rush to escape. It becomes something else, a presence, a companion, a living current of understanding. You begin to hear things differently. The tone beneath the words, the emotion behind the noise, the rhythm inside the chaos. What once felt like emptiness reveals itself as fullness, a deep reservoir of wisdom that had been waiting for your attention all along. And it's in this space that a quiet kind of mastery begins to form, the kind that doesn't shout to be seen, but commands respect simply by being. True mastery, the kind that endures through generations, is not born from endless activity. It's not the constant motion that builds empires, but the calm that directs that motion. When success is guided by peace rather than panic, by clarity rather than compulsion, it becomes stable, self-sustaining. Many people build achievements on foundations of anxiety, racing toward goals not out of purpose, but out of fear of stillness. But those who reach a deeper level of mastery learn to reverse that equation. Their peace becomes the root, and their success becomes the fruit. They no longer chase results. They cultivate them slowly and deliberately, as a gardener tends a season's crop, trusting that time will do what rushing never could. You can see this quiet power in those who lead without raising their voices. Consider the leader who speaks less, but moves mountains with their words. When they do speak, people listen. Not because the tone is louder, but because it is grounded. There's a kind of energy that radiates from presence, a subtle confidence that says, I don't need to prove anything. Their pauses carry more gravity than another's speeches, because those pauses are not empty. They're filled with thought, intention, and restraint. They've learned that in a noisy world, silence itself can be a form of influence, one that invites reflection instead of reaction. Think about great figures across history or business who embody this. Warren Buffett once said that the stock market is a mechanism for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. That insight was not born from chasing every trade or reacting to every rumor. It came from years of sitting quietly with data, with reflection, with patience, from trusting stillness over impulse. Or consider Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison not merely waiting but thinking, refining, becoming. When he finally spoke, his words reshaped nations. His silence had not been passive. It had been preparation. The calm of his mind became the architecture of his leadership. It's in such stillness that vision matures. Ideas like fruit need time to ripen. In the noise of constant action, ideas are often plucked too early, launched before they're ready, spoken before they're wise. But when you learn to sit in silence, you give them space to evolve from impulse into insight, from spark into strategy, from dream into legacy. It's the difference between reacting to opportunity and creating it. The world might tempt you to release everything as soon as it's half-formed, but mastery teaches patience. The understanding that timing matters as much as talent. A vision born in noise may gain attention, but a vision refined in silence gains endurance. The paradox deepens as you walk further down this path. The more you let go of urgency, the more abundance seems to appear. Urgency is a kind of grasping, a signal that we don't yet trust the process. We think that pushing harder, faster, louder will guarantee the result. But letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means aligning with the natural rhythm of growth. The river doesn't rush, yet it carves valleys over time. The seed doesn't scream, yet it breaks through the earth in perfect season. Surrender, in this sense, becomes a form of strength. The courage to believe that what you've planted will bear fruit without your constant interference. This is not laziness, it's faith in the quiet mechanics of progress. Stillness becomes a teacher here, whispering lessons that activity drowns out. It teaches you that wisdom doesn't shout. It listens. It listens to the subtle patterns beneath events, to the intuition that warns before logic can explain, to the pauses in a conversation where truth often hides. The wise learn that silence is not merely a lack of words. It's the space where understanding breathes. You start to see how most of life's mistakes come not from ignorance, but from impatience. We speak before we understand, spend before we plan, react before we reflect. But the still mind catches itself before the fall. It watches emotion pass before turning it into action. This kind of listening reshapes not only how we think, but how we live. When you listen deeply, to yourself, to others, to the quiet guidance of experience, you start to act from alignment rather than impulse. The choices you make are cleaner, less burdened by doubt. You no longer feel the constant need to force outcomes because you trust that your pace is in harmony with something larger. This alignment creates a different kind of success, one that feels lighter, freer, more sustainable. You stop chasing the next opportunity and start magnetizing the right ones. Success stops being something you chase and becomes something you naturally attract. You can see this in every domain of life. In finance, stillness shows up as disciplined patience, the ability to hold when others panic, to think long-term when others think loud-term. In relationships, it shows up as the quiet strength of understanding instead of arguing, of responding instead of reacting. In personal growth, it's the decision to pause before changing direction, to check alignment before acceleration. Each expression of stillness refines your life's rhythm, replacing friction with flow. The more you practice it, the less you're swayed by external noise, and the more your inner compass begins to guide the way. And maybe that's the essence of all wisdom born from silence. It returns you to yourself. Beneath the layers of ambition, identity, and noise lies a self that already knows the way, the part of you that has always known what matters. Silence simply clears the fog so that self can emerge again. From that centered space, success stops being about conquest and becomes about congruence, the alignment of what you do with who you are. It's a quieter, steadier, more powerful way to live. So the invitation is simple. Listen more than you speak, pause more than you rush, and trust more than you force. The world may not understand this rhythm at first. It will try to pull you back into the noise. But remember, real power doesn't come from motion, it comes from mastery. And mastery begins not in action, but in awareness. When you stand in that silence long enough, you'll find that everything you were chasing was waiting there all along, calm, clear, and ready to move with you, not against you. The lesson always circles back to this. Motion without meaning drains, while stillness with intent builds. Most of us begin our journeys believing that the more we move, the more progress we make, that energy equals effectiveness. But as time and experience unfold, a subtler truth emerges. It's not movement that defines progress, it's direction. Energy without alignment is chaos. Motion without clarity is exhaustion disguised as productivity. There comes a point when we begin to see that life isn't asking us to move faster. It's asking us to move wiser. That realization is where stillness becomes the invisible architecture behind everything meaningful we create. When you start to integrate this truth, something shifts deep within you. The same energy that once fueled your restlessness begins to take on a different shape. The drive that used to push you into unnecessary battles now channels into precise, deliberate effort. You no longer act to prove yourself, you act to express yourself. The compulsion to be everywhere, to say yes to everything, to do more simply for the sake of doing dissolves into a steady confidence. What once felt like chaos becomes composition, the same notes but finally arranged into harmony. You realize that power doesn't come from the noise of constant motion. It comes from the clarity that directs that motion. There's a kind of rhythm you start to sense in everything. In work, in relationships, in growth. Each has its own inhale and exhale, its own season of expansion and rest. The person who learns to sense these rhythms no longer burns out chasing perpetual summer. They plant when it's time to plant, harvest when it's time to reap, and rest when the soil needs renewal. This rhythm is not laziness, it's intelligence. You begin to see how even nature honors its cycles. The tides pull back before returning. The trees stand bare before blooming again. Stillness is not stagnation. It's preparation. It's the invisible phase where roots deepen before branches rise. In our culture, we often glorify the push, the hustle, the grind, the endless chase, while overlooking the pause that makes the push effective. The pause before speaking, the reflection before investing, the breath before deciding. When you begin to live by rhythm rather than reaction, you no longer feel the frantic pressure to keep up with everyone else. You realize that your timing is your power, that moving in sync with your purpose creates results that effort alone never could. It's like discovering that the universe was never asking you to sprint, only to align your steps with its music. And as this awareness deepens, the restlessness that once felt so natural begins to feel foreign. You look back at your old patterns, the endless scrolling, the unnecessary arguments, the need to be constantly producing, and they seem like artifacts from another life. You start to wonder how you ever mistook motion for progress, or busyness for meaning. In stillness, you find not emptiness but fullness, a richer engagement with the moment you're in. Even simple things, a quiet morning, an unhurried conversation, a walk without a destination, start to hold a quiet beauty that was invisible before. The mind, once addicted to noise, learns to rest in intervals of silence. It's in these intervals that clarity gathers its strength. This change is not about withdrawing from ambition, it's about refining it. You still pursue excellence, but now it's guided by something deeper than urgency. Success, once defined by pace, begins to take on a new shape. It feels less like a race and more like harmony, a balance between purpose and patience. You stop measuring achievement by how much you can cram into a day, and start measuring it by how aligned your actions feel with your vision. Some days that might mean working with quiet intensity. Other days it might mean waiting, not passively but consciously, allowing insight to arrive before action. You begin to respect timing as much as effort, silence as much as speech. This is the rhythm of sustainable success, the kind that doesn't just build wealth but preserves it, that doesn't just create impact but meaning. There's an interesting transformation that happens when you live this way. The empire you build is no longer purely external. It's internal, a kingdom of calm, direction, and deliberate power. The real wealth begins to show up not in your possessions, but in your presence. You carry yourself differently, not with the arrogance of certainty, but with the quiet confidence of clarity. When you enter a room, you don't need to dominate the space. Your calm becomes the gravity that draws others in. People sense that you are not easily swayed by noise, not desperate for validation, not rushing to prove. You've built something unshakable, an inner stability that no market crash, no criticism, no chaos can take from you. It's in that internal empire that your external success finds its foundation. A calm mind invests more wisely. A centered leader inspires more deeply. A patient creator produces work that endures. What once required strain now flows with ease because it's no longer forced. It's aligned. You begin to see that the greatest results often come from the smallest, most intentional actions, the ones born from stillness. You realize that stillness isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing the right thing at the right time, with a clear heart and an unhurried mind. Eventually, something even more profound happens. Stillness stops feeling like a strategy and becomes your nature. It's no longer something you practice. It's something you are. The pauses between your actions aren't planned. They're instinctive, as natural as a heartbeat. You navigate challenges without panic because your first instinct is no longer reaction. It's reflection. You've rewired your relationship with time, success, and effort. The world around you might still move in chaos, but inside, there's a steady rhythm, one that keeps you grounded, aware, and at peace. This is what true power feels like. Not the loud, performative kind that burns bright and fades quickly, but the quiet, enduring kind that sustains itself from within. You no longer chase opportunities. You attract them. You no longer fear uncertainty. You move with it. You no longer equate doing with achieving. You understand that being as calm, clear, deliberate is the highest form of doing. The empire you've built is both invisible and undeniable. It's the stillness that anchors every decision, the clarity that guides every move, the calm that turns ordinary effort into extraordinary impact. And so, the journey that began with the paradox that doing less could lead to more ends with a realization. Stillness was never the opposite of motion. It was the intelligence that made motion meaningful. You are no longer at war with time, with success, with yourself. You've learned to move in rhythm with life, and in doing so, you've stepped into a rare kind of mastery, one that builds not just empires, but peace. Looking back, you begin to see with new eyes. The years of chasing, the endless striving, the restless reaching, were never really about success. They were about peace, though you didn't know it at the time. You were chasing a feeling, not a finish line. The trophies, the numbers, the recognition, they were only symbols for something deeper you were trying to touch. The quiet assurance that you were enough, that you were safe, that your life had meaning. But somewhere along the way, the pursuit of peace became disguised as ambition. You convinced yourself that peace would come after the next victory, after the next milestone. What you didn't realize was that peace never hides behind achievement. It waits patiently beneath it, underneath the noise, waiting for you to stop running long enough to feel it. When you look back on those years, the exhaustion that once felt noble now feels almost tragic. You can still remember the late nights, the constant calculations, the quiet anxiety that hummed in the background of even your brightest moments. You wore your exhaustion like a badge of honor, proof that you were doing everything you could to make it. Society reinforced this illusion. The busier you were, the more important you must be. But beneath that performance of productivity was a quiet depletion. The cost of the chase was subtle, not just sleepless nights or missed meals, but moments of joy you never fully tasted, conversations you only half heard, sunsets you didn't pause to notice. You were surviving success rather than living it. There's a tenderness that arises when you start to see that clearly, a compassion for your past self, the one who truly believed that effort was the only language of worth. That version of you wasn't foolish. They were simply untrained in peace. They thought the only way to deserve rest was to earn it through exhaustion. They believed that slowing down meant falling behind, that stillness meant failure. How could they have known that the opposite was true, that peace was not a reward for effort but a resource for it? When you begin to understand that, something inside you softens. You no longer feel the need to judge the old you for running so hard. You simply smile, maybe even tear up a little, recognizing that all along you were doing the best you could with the awareness you had. And that's where forgiveness enters, quiet but powerful. You begin to forgive yourself for running so fast, for mistaking movement for meaning, for confusing effort with identity. You start to see how much of your past drive was fueled not by passion, but by fear. Fear of being left behind, of being unseen, of not being enough. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It transforms it. It turns your mistakes into mirrors, your struggles into teachers. The pace that once ruled you now feels optional. You can still move fast when needed, but the compulsion is gone. You're no longer sprinting out of scarcity. You're walking in sufficiency. There's a dignity in that shift, a quiet knowing that you no longer have to prove your worth through motion. In that forgiveness, something miraculous happens. Peace no longer feels like something you have to earn. It begins to feel like something you simply allow. You stop negotiating for it, stop delaying it, stop attaching it to conditions. You begin to realize that peace doesn't arrive when everything is perfect. It arrives when you stop insisting that it must be. It's a kind of surrender, but not the weak kind, the wise kind. You start to see peace as your natural state, not your occasional visitor. You don't chase it anymore. You protect it. You guard your mornings, your focus, your energy, not because you're selfish, but because you understand that a peaceful mind is the foundation of everything meaningful you'll ever create. And yet, the noise of the world doesn't vanish. It's still there. The headlines, the opinions, the constant stream of digital chatter. The difference is it no longer commands your attention. You've tuned yourself to a different frequency. The old static, the urgency, the comparison, the false sense of competition doesn't reach you the same way anymore. You've trained your attention like a muscle, learning what deserves your focus and what doesn't. It's not that you've withdrawn from the world. You've simply learned how to participate without being consumed. The world still moves at its frantic pace, but inside, you move at your own. Steady, deliberate, aware. It's a quiet kind of power, one that others might not notice at first, but one that changes everything you touch. That shift in focus doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how you lead, how you decide, how you create. You begin to see the truth behind the old saying, "The mind that rests well rules well." When you are no longer governed by urgency, you make choices from wisdom, not worry. Your thoughts are sharper, your actions more effective. You begin to realize that rest is not the opposite of productivity. It's the root of it. Great decisions are rarely made in panic. Great ideas rarely emerge from exhaustion. The leaders, creators, and thinkers who shape the world are not the ones who rush the most. They are the ones who can pause, reflect, and respond with clarity. You start to sense that same capacity awakening in you, the ability to act from calm rather than chaos. It's almost poetic, how what once felt like weakness now feels like strength. Stillness, rest, silence. These were once the moments you avoided. Now they've become the spaces where your best insights arrive. You might be sitting at your desk, sipping coffee, or walking without your phone, and suddenly clarity strikes. An idea, a realization, a solution. You didn't chase it. You created the space for it to find you. That's the gift of peace, and it sharpens perception. When your mind is no longer cluttered with noise, wisdom rises naturally. You begin to understand why the greatest thinkers, from ancient philosophers to modern innovators, all valued solitude. They weren't escaping the world. They were learning to hear it more deeply. And so, as you reconnect emotionally with your journey, you find a deep gratitude for every phase of it. The chase taught you discipline. The exhaustion taught you limits. The stillness taught you truth. You needed to run before you could understand rest. You needed to strive before you could recognize that striving was never the point. Each version of you, the ambitious one, the weary one, the reflective one, was essential to your evolution. That's the beauty of growth. It doesn't reject the past. It integrates it. You don't abandon your drive, you refine it. You don't abandon ambition, you align it with peace. In this reflection, you realize that peace was never the end of the journey. It was the guide you were seeking all along. It was the quiet compass beneath the noise pointing you home. And now, as you sit in this newfound calm, you understand that mastery is not the art of doing more, but of needing less. You no longer crave control over everything. You trust yourself to respond wisely to whatever comes. The world may still spin with its urgency and noise, but you've learned to listen differently. You've learned that a rested mind doesn't just see clearly. It leads clearly. And that perhaps is the truest form of success. A peace so steady that nothing outside of you can disturb it. Gratitude, when it finally arrives, doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It comes quietly, like morning light slipping through a curtain. It's not the kind of gratitude that celebrates accumulation or achievement, but the kind that settles deep in your chest, when you realize what you no longer need. You find yourself thankful not for what you've gained, but for what you've let go of. The need to prove, the urgency to rush, the craving to be seen. These once felt like the fuel of ambition, but now you see them for what they were. Weights disguised as wings. Letting them go doesn't make you smaller. It makes you lighter. And for the first time in a long time, you can breathe fully. Without the pressure to perform, you start to notice this new gratitude in the smallest moments. Not in the peaks of success, but in the quiet in-between spaces. A morning coffee without checking your phone. A conversation where you listen more than you speak. A task done not for recognition, but for the simple satisfaction of doing it well. There's a strange beauty in the ordinary. Once you stop trying to outrun it, you begin to see that meaning isn't hidden in extraordinary achievement. It's woven through the fabric of presence. You were never missing purpose. You were missing stillness long enough to feel it. And when you finally slow down, the world reveals its softness again. It's almost startling to realize how different life feels without the constant hum of urgency. The same world remains, the same people, challenges, responsibilities, yet everything moves at a different pace. You still work, create, strive, but now there's rhythm instead of restlessness. You approach each day with intention rather than impulse. You begin to notice patterns you once ignored. How inspiration comes easiest when you aren't forcing it. How opportunities seem to appear when you're patient enough to wait for them. The same actions that once drained you now energize you because they flow from a centered place, rather than from fear or comparison. This shift isn't about doing less. It's about doing from a different state of being. When you no longer operate from scarcity, the fear of falling behind, the need to be seen as successful, your work becomes an act of expression, not survival. You realize that the most powerful creators, leaders, and thinkers don't move faster than everyone else. They move truer. They understand the subtle distinction between momentum and mania. One builds, the other burns. And when your movements are rooted in stillness, even the smallest actions carry a different kind of gravity. They last. With this newfound awareness, imperfection begins to look different too. It no longer feels like failure. It feels like evidence of life. Every missed opportunity, every mistake, every delayed dream becomes part of your rhythm rather than a rupture in it. You start to see how perfectionism was just another disguise for fear. Fear of being judged, of not measuring up, of losing control. But now you understand that imperfection is where authenticity breathes. A cracked voice in a speech, a stumble in a plan, a quiet day when you do nothing at all. These are no longer threats to your worth. They are reminders that you are not a machine built to produce, but a soul meant to evolve. The heart softens when you no longer need to prove anything. It beats differently, slower, steadier, unhurried. The breath evens out, no longer hijacked by anxiety or comparison. You notice the subtleties of life again, the way sunlight lands on your desk, the sound of laughter echoing from another room, the feeling of gratitude that shows up for no reason at all. This is what peace feels like, not a grand event, but a steady undercurrent that runs through your days. The spirit feels timeless again because it's no longer bound by clocks or calendars. You no longer measure your value by how much you accomplish in a day, but by how deeply you live it. It's in this timeless state that you begin to understand something profound. Success and serenity are not opposites. They are reflections of the same truth, that inner order creates outer achievement. For so long, you believed that peace would come after success. Now you see that peace creates success, the kind that doesn't collapse under pressure, the kind that endures. When your inner world is aligned, decisions become clearer, relationships deepen, creativity flows effortlessly. You stop chasing balance and start embodying it. It's not that challenges disappear. It's that your response to them changes. You no longer meet life with resistance. You meet it with rhythm. This harmony changes the texture of everything. You might still have goals, ambitions, visions for the future, but they no longer come from a place of lack. You don't chase them to fill a void. You move toward them to express fullness. It's the difference between running toward something and running from something. The former feels empowering, the latter exhausting. You finally grasp that your power doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from alignment. Every decision, every action, every dream now arises from a deep sense of inner stability. You move through life not to prove your worth, but to live it. As this awareness deepens, the silence that once felt uncomfortable now feels like home. You don't need to fill it with sound, distraction, or validation. You can simply sit in it, unguarded, and feel whole. This silence isn't empty, it's full. Full of knowing, full of clarity, full of presence. It's the kind of silence that hums with life. The same silence from which the greatest ideas, the most meaningful relationships, and the most peaceful moments are born. It's in this stillness that you finally realize the outer world has always been a reflection of the inner one. When you master your inner rhythm, the world moves in harmony with you. You may find yourself smiling more often for no reason, laughing more easily, worrying less about how things look, and caring more about how they feel. There's a serenity that others can sense, not loud or performative, but quietly magnetic. People may ask how you've changed, what you're doing differently. You might not even have words for it, because it isn't a tactic or a routine. It's simply that you've stopped chasing what was never missing. You've learned to trust yourself, to listen, to wait. And in doing so, you've discovered a truth most people spend a lifetime searching for. Peace was never the prize at the end of the race. It was the ground beneath your feet all along. Now, when you move through the world, you do so differently. Not faster, not louder, but truer. The need to prove has melted into quiet self-trust. The race has turned into a rhythm. You've learned that stillness isn't the opposite of growth. It's the soil that nourishes it. And as you breathe in this realization, you feel something simple and profound. You've come home. Not to a place, not to a title, but to yourself. The silence once feared now feels sacred, and in that silence, life begins again. Not rushed, not forced, but perfectly in tune with the rhythm of your own becoming. Every great work begins in a place most people rush past, the stillness before motion. Picture a sculptor standing silently before a block of marble, fingers pressed to a rough surface, vision unspoken but clear. Or imagine an orchestra tuning in hushed expectation before the conductor raises the baton. That silence is not absence but readiness. Empires and masterpieces share this hidden trait. They are conceived in quiet, shaped by patience, and realized when action emerges from precise timing rather than frantic force. To inhabit that stillness is to give your future the dignity of a thoughtful beginning. Deliberate timing is the strategist's most neglected tool. We live in an age that celebrates relentless activity, where calendars are crowded like trophies and speed is mistaken for competence. Yet the person who understands rhythm knows that movement without timing is wasted energy. Strategy is not a string of actions, but a choreography of moments. When to wait, when to speak, when to strike. The greatest leaders do not move constantly. They move when the conditions are right, and their restraint is what makes each move land with consequence. Patience is often mischaracterized as passivity, when in fact it is a form of craftsmanship. Consider the watchmaker who assembles gears so fine that time itself becomes legible. Each component must be placed with care, not hurried into position. Patience sharpens judgment, synthesizes information, and allows the slow accumulation of advantage that impatience can never manufacture. Waiting is not resignation. It is preparatory work that readies you to act when action will be most effective. The art of waiting is the art of waiting well, not idly, but with attention, with study, with the quiet gathering of resources and insight. Those who master stillness do something paradoxical. They stop chasing and begin to attract. In markets, in relationships, in careers, frantic effort tends to broadcast desperation. It distorts perception and invites error. But restraint signals competence. People, opportunities, and capital are drawn to steadiness because steadiness predicts endurance. When you move from a centered place, your presence itself becomes an argument for trust. Not because you shout the loudest, but because your silence suggests deliberation. Your calm suggests capacity. In that way, stillness is magnetic. Motion creates noise. Stillness creates meaning. Noise disperses attention and blurs priorities, while stillness clarifies them. Think of the difference between a crowded conversation where everyone speaks at once and a single voice that speaks after listening. The latter carries resonance because it has been informed by what came before. In practical terms, this means fewer but better decisions, fewer initiatives pursued and more initiatives completed with depth. The meaningful move is not the fastest move, but the one that emerges from understanding, context, and alignment with a larger narrative. Building an empire, or simply building a life of depth, is less about multiplying actions than about amplifying presence. Presence sharpens perception. Perception guides choice. Choice produces consequence. When you are present, you see subtle inflections in people, markets, and moments that others miss in their rush. You recognize when a trend is merely noise and when it is signal. You choose partnerships for mutual coherence, investments for resilience, projects for legacy rather than immediate applause. Being more attentive, more reflective, more centered, yields leverage that doing more never attains. Stillness that builds empires is an inner mastery more than an external tactic. It is not found in silence alone, but in the disciplined calm that governs your reactions, your planning, and your daily rhythms. This mastery expresses itself in small, repeatable practices: the habit of waiting before replying, the ritual of long-form reading instead of skimming, the refusal to take every meeting that asks for your time. Over years, these modest practices compound into a presence that carries weight. What looks like an advantage in the short term, speed, noise, urgency, often erodes strength. What looks like a disadvantage, patience, restraint, listening, and often builds it. The paradox of pause is also the quiet engine of resilience. When markets fall or reputations wobble, when projects stall and relationships strain, those built on still foundations bend without breaking. A calm mind treats setbacks as information rather than indictment, and from that perspective, the right move becomes visible. Waiting is not about avoiding risk. It is about choosing which risks to take and when. The patient strategist knows that timing can turn misfortune into opportunity, and that the cost of premature action is often far higher than the cost of a well-timed wait. So let patience be your strategy and stillness your rehearsal. Give your decisions the time to clarify themselves. Let your ambition be guided by a steady hand rather than a trembling one. The most strategic move is often to wait, not passively but with purpose. Not out of fear, but out of confidence that clarity can be cultivated. When you learn to hold space for the right moment, you convert distraction into focus, hurry into craft, and fleeting wins into lasting capital. In the quiet that precedes decisive action, you find not indecision but intelligence. In the end, the greatest empires are less monuments of motion and more testaments to measured timing. They are the result of many small, well-placed acts born from a calm center. You will discover that your capacity to wait with wisdom, to prepare, to observe, to act when the moment aligns, becomes the most reliable currency you possess. Build from that center, and your work will carry not only success but significance. The stillness that builds empires is ultimately the mastery of yourself, and therein lies the truest power. Thank you for walking this quiet journey, a journey not of conquest but of return. In a world that measures worth in motion, it takes courage to slow down, to listen, to be deliberate. You have not simply traveled through words, but through spaces between them. The pauses, the silences, the reflections that give those words their meaning. If there's one truth this exploration has revealed, it's that growth often begins where the noise ends. Stillness is not a retreat from the world. It's the vantage point from which the world becomes clear. There's a beauty in arriving here, not at a finish line, but at a still point within yourself. This is the place from which every empire is built. Every decision takes root, every vision finds form. The calm mind builds what the restless mind destroys, because calmness is not absence, it's access. It connects you to a deeper intelligence that rush overlooks. The world rewards noise, but history remembers clarity. And clarity always is born of stillness. As you return to your daily life, the conversations, the deadlines, the unending lists, remember that stillness is portable. You carry it with you. It's the deep breath before you speak, the pause before you decide, the quiet confidence in a crowded room. You don't have to abandon ambition to embrace stillness. You refine ambition through it. You learn to move with precision rather than panic, with intention rather than impulse. Each moment of stillness becomes a decision sharpened, a path simplified, a burden lifted. The paradox, as always, remains: by doing less, you achieve more. Not because the world slows for you, but because your awareness expands within it. You begin to see what truly matters. Not every flicker of opportunity, but the steady flame of purpose. You start noticing that patience earns what haste spends, and that the longest-lasting success is built quietly, beneath the surface, before it ever appears in the world. Every pause holds power. Every breath can be a beginning. Even now, as you listen to these final words, you can feel that subtle rhythm. Inhale, exhale, expansion, release. This is the rhythm of life itself, the original wealth, the first empire. When you honor it, you align with something much larger than productivity or progress. You align with presence. And from presence, everything meaningful grows. So take this stillness with you, into your work, your relationships, your financial pursuits, your dreams. Let it steady your hand when markets shake, ground your heart when ambitions flare, and remind you that wisdom is rarely loud. The calm you cultivate today becomes the foundation of the empire you build tomorrow. And in that calm, may you find not less of life, but all of it. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not stillness as silence, but stillness as strength. The journey does not end here. It deepens. For in stillness, you are no longer chasing the world. You are shaping it, one quiet, deliberate breath at a time.